My name is Noah Carter, a former night shift maintenance technician at the Black Glass Tidal Station in Alaska. If I'm lying, then assume I never existed. I don't know where it makes the most sense to begin. Maybe with the moment I signed the contract to work at Black Glass, an offshore research station nearly 4 miles from the Alaskan coast, after I had lost almost everything in my real life. My wife, Emily, died in a car accident I still cannot fully remember, even though I have tried hundreds of times. My family had cut ties with me a few years earlier. And the last job I had before coming here was making nighttime deliveries in a city I never wanted to return to. Black Glass appeared like an escape. Unusually high pay, no requirement for extensive experience, no thorough background check, and most importantly, they urgently needed someone for the night shift. I don't remember how I found it. I only remember signing the contract, and then they brought me here by helicopter, across a sea so cold and thick with fog that I couldn't see the water below. The station stood on steel pillars driven deep into the seabed, as though someone had tried to build a structure directly over the ocean's throat. A floating bridge connected it to the mainland, but I was told it only appeared when the tide dropped low enough. I should have found it strange from the beginning, but I didn't, because at the time I only needed somewhere to disappear. What made me write this post wasn't the job itself, but what happened afterward, the rules, the knocking beneath the floor. And the truth I only began to understand when it was already too late to turn back. If anyone reads this, please believe one thing. I don't know what Black Glass really is, but it is not a research station, and I am not the first person to take this job. On Monday, October 14, I heard the first knocking at 2:13 a.m. 3 knocks. Knock. Knock. Knock directly beneath the metal floor right beside my feet. I jumped so hard that I dropped my wrench. It clattered down the narrow hallway of the Black Glass Tidal Station before becoming lodged in a drainage grate. I stood frozen. Beyond the windows, the Alaskan sea was black as oil. Wind battered the station, making the entire steel structure tremble slightly on the support columns driven deep into the reef. In the distance, there was nothing but the blinking red light of a warning buoy and dense fog. Then the knocking came again, this time directly beneath where the wrench had fallen. Knock, knock, knock. I knelt and shone my flashlight through the metal grating beneath the floor. All I could see was black seawater glimmering between the steel support beams. Waves crashed below. No one could possibly have been standing there. "Don't knock back!" The woman's voice behind me nearly made me scream. I spun around. A woman of about 30 stood at the end of the hallway, wearing an old yellow raincoat. Her hair was tied neatly back, and she stood as though she had been there all along. I swear the hallway had been empty 5 seconds earlier. "Who are you?" "Lena." She walked toward me, calmly picked up the wrench and handed it back. "Day shift technician. I stayed up late." "I didn't see you come in. You won't hear it arrive either." She looked down at the floor, her smile as thin as paper. "Remember this, rule 1, if you hear knocking beneath the floor, never knock back." I gave a dry laugh. "Nice. Is this some kind of new hazing ritual?" She didn't laugh. Outside, a large wave slammed into one of the station's support columns. The entire hallway shook. "What's your name?" "Noah." "All right, Noah, if you want to survive your first week, don't treat this like a joke." I had started working there 3 days earlier. After Emily died in the car accident, I sold the apartment, left the city, and accepted anything that would keep me from looking at places where she had once been. Black Glass paid well, urgently needed a night shift maintenance worker, and didn't ask many questions. I should have wondered why they were in such a hurry. The station stood nearly 4 miles offshore, connected to the mainland by a floating bridge that only emerged when the tide was low. When the water rose, the bridge disappeared completely beneath the sea. In other words, if something went wrong, you were trapped. I followed Lena to the maintenance room, a narrow space filled with tool cabinets, electrical panels, and the smell of machine oil. An old whiteboard hung on the wall. Several lines had been partially erased. I only managed to read, "Do not knock back. If the hallway lights flicker." The rest had been smeared away. "Who wrote that?" "The person before you." "Where is he?" Lena looked away. "He didn't complete his first week." At 3:07 a.m., a pressure alarm sounded from the lower level. Lena and I ran down a spiral steel staircase toward the pump room. Every footstep echoed like a gunshot through the enclosed space. The lower level was hotter, damp, and heavy with the smell of salt. Pipes as wide as a human torso ran along the ceiling. The valves shook violently. The fluorescent lights flickered. Lena cursed under her breath. "Rule 2, she said quickly. "If the hallway lights flicker 3 times in a row, don't look into the darkness between the flashes." "What?" The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. The lights came on, then went out. On, then off. On the third flicker, instinct made me look directly into the dark corner beside the pump. Something was standing there, far too tall to be human, its shoulders nearly touching the ceiling. Its skin was deathly pale and slick like a dead fish. Its head tilted to one side at an impossible angle. Then the lights came on fully. The corner was empty. A sharp pain tore through my left eye. I covered my face and screamed. Blood seeped between my fingers. "You looked into the darkness." Lena pulled me backward. "I saw someone." "No, it saw you." She pressed a piece of gauze into my hand. When I lowered my hand, my palm was covered in watery blood and something small and white. A human fingernail was resting inside my eye socket. I vomited onto the floor. We shut the valve, reset the system, and returned upstairs. I was trembling as though I had a fever. "How are you going to explain that?" I asked. "Do you want the scientific explanation or the useful one?" "I want the truth." Lena poured thick black coffee into a metal cup. "The truth is that black glass was built over the remains of an old Yupik whaling village. There was an accident 20 years ago. 6 workers became trapped inside a tunnel when the tide rose. They heard rescue knocks beneath the floor for 10 hours. She set the cup down. When the rescue team opened the door, only one man was still alive, and he no longer looked human. I let out a hollow laugh. "You don't have to believe me, but remember the rules." She stepped toward the door. "I'm going to inspect the West Wing." "Wait, how many rules are there?" She stopped. 9. Then she disappeared into the hallway. At 4:21 a.m., I was alone. My first mistake was opening the security footage to prove that Lena was trying to scare me. There were 12 black and white monitors showing the hallways, storage rooms, staircases, and outdoor deck. Camera 6 showed the hallway where we had met. I rewound the footage. At 2:12 a.m., I entered the hallway alone and stood looking down through the floor. The knocking began. I turned around. No one was behind me. Then I flinched as though someone had spoken. But Lena never appeared on the recording. No one did. I continued playing the footage. I stood there speaking to empty space for almost 2 minutes. I accepted the wrench from thin air. The wrench lifted itself from the floor and dropped into my hand. I shot to my feet, knocking the chair over behind me. Static filled the monitors. All 12 cameras began crackling at the same time. Then a face pressed against the lens of camera 6. Pale skin, a mouth far too wide, rows of teeth thick as nails driven into wood. It knocked from the other side of the screen. Knock, knock, knock. I backed away and slammed into a storage cabinet. The radio on the desk shrieked to life. Lena's distorted voice came through. "Noah, don't watch the cameras after 4 in the morning. I forgot to tell you." What the hell did I just see? Rule 3, after 4:00 a.m., if a face appears on one of the cameras and looks directly at you, turn off the monitor for 10 seconds. Don't let it see you looking back. Why didn't you tell me sooner? There were a few seconds of silence before Lena answered quietly, "Because I didn't think it would be interested in you tonight." Monitor 6 shook violently, as though someone were pounding on it from the inside. I ripped the power cord from the entire surveillance system. The room sank into a deathly hiss of static. 10 seconds felt like 10 minutes. When I plugged everything back in, camera 6 showed nothing but an empty hallway, but outside the maintenance room door, fingernails began scraping against the metal. Screech, screech, screech. I locked the bolt. The scratching turned into 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. "Noah," Lena's voice came from outside the door. "Open up, it's me." I took half a step forward, then stopped. "Say something so I know it's really you." Silence outside, then her voice came softly. "Emily liked sugar in her coffee." The blood in my body turned to ice. I had never told anyone here my wife's name. The door handle slowly turned downward. Metal groaned. Then seawater began flowing through the gap beneath the door. Tuesday, October 15. The seawater poured through the gap like blood from a freezing wound. Within seconds, it had risen above my ankles. The door handle continued lowering slowly, as though whoever stood outside wanted to see how long it would take me to panic. "Noah." Lena's voice came again, soft, calm, almost gentle. "Open the door. It can't come inside while I'm here." I backed away another step. "How do you know Emily's name?" No answer. The water rose faster. Then the voice outside changed, deeper, rougher. Open the door. A heavy impact bent the door inward. I grabbed the iron pry bar beside the storage cabinet and wedged it across the handle. The second impact was so powerful that screws tore loose from the frame. The radio on the table shrieked to life. The real Lena's voice came through this time, breathless and filled with roaring wind. "Noah, don't open it. I'm on the east deck." I froze. Outside the door, her voice continued. "You heard wrong." The third impact came. The pry bar flew from my hands and crashed into the corner of the room. The lights flickered. I rushed toward the ventilation opening behind the electrical cabinet and tore at the metal grate with both hands. The sharp edges sliced open my palms. Hot blood poured down my wrists. The center of the main door began collapsing inward. I crawled into the ventilation shaft just as steel exploded behind me. The duct was so narrow that I had to pull myself forward on my elbows. Every breath filled my throat with rust and salt. Something was crawling behind me, not quickly, not urgently, just steadily. Clank, scrape, clank, like fingernails dragging across sheet metal. I crawled frantically, my shoulders repeatedly slamming into the sides of the duct. The cuts on my hands left a long trail of blood behind me. Beneath the metal, knocking echoed from every direction. 3 knocks, then 3 more, then another 3. The entire station was knocking. I screamed when something grabbed my foot. A hand as cold as a frozen corpse reached through a maintenance gap and clamped around my ankle. Its skin was wrinkled and deathly pale. Its fingernails were long and soft like fish bones. I kicked wildly. I heard one of my toes crack. The hand released me. I kept crawling, tears streaming from the pain. At last, I kicked open an exhaust panel and fell into a storage room. My back struck the floor. The room was completely dark except for the faint red glow of an emergency light in the corner. A hand pulled me to my feet. Lena, this time it was really her. Her hair was soaking wet and her face was pale from the cold. "Come with me. I just heard you outside the door. I know. You know my wife's name. Not now." She grabbed my wrist and pulled me between the storage shelves. I tore my arm free. "What the hell do you mean, not now? Who are you?" A heavy impact sounded above the storage room ceiling. Something was moving across the pipes. Fast, very fast, Lena threw me a flashlight. "If you want to interrogate me, do it while you're still alive." We ran into the cargo hallway leading toward the old kitchen. The red emergency lights stretched across the steel walls like streaks of blood. Lena spoke quickly as we moved. "Rule 4, if you hear footsteps running across the ceiling, don't run in the same direction. Turn left at the nearest intersection." "Why?" "Because it can hear your heartbeat." "That makes no sense." "Do you want to test it?" Directly above us, the footsteps accelerated. Thud, 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 thud. Running parallel to us, I panicked and sprinted straight ahead. Lena grabbed my shirt and dragged me left into the industrial kitchen. 1 second later, something crashed through an old ceiling panel in the hallway behind me. Metal fragments exploded through the air. A long arm swept across the passage. If I had been half a step slower, my head would have been lying on the floor. We secured the kitchen door with an iron bar. I leaned against a stainless steel counter, breathing like I was dying. Lena wrapped a cloth around my foot. My little toe was bent completely sideways. "It's broken. Thank you. You can still walk." "That isn't comforting. It wasn't meant to be." Outside the door, something dragged its claws along the steel surface. Screech, screech, screech. I looked at her. "Start talking." Lena remained silent for several seconds. "I used to be the night shift supervisor here. Used to be. I quit last year." "Then why did you come back?" She looked down at her hands. "Because my younger brother never came home." A brief silence followed. For the first time, I saw genuine pain in her face. "His name was Miles. He took this job just like you during his first week." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Survive." Outside the door, the scratching stopped completely. The sudden silence sent a deeper chill through me than the noise had. Lena opened a kitchen drawer and pulled out a waterproof box of matches and a small brass bell. "Rule 5. She placed the bell in my hand. "If the entire station becomes completely silent for more than 10 seconds, ring the bell 3 times. Otherwise, it will think everyone is dead." I stared at her as though she were insane. "That is the stupidest thing I've heard all day." "Start counting." We fell silent. 1, 2, 3. The wind outside disappeared. 4, 5. The generator, which had been vibrating beneath the floor, went silent. 6, 7. My ears began ringing from the emptiness. 8, 9, Lena nodded sharply. I rang the bell, chime, chime, chime. Immediately, a painful shriek erupted from the other side of the door like red-hot metal being plunged into freezing water. The entire door shook violently. I looked up. All right, I hate that you're always right. We left the kitchen and moved toward the staircase leading to the outdoor deck. Our goal was the radio tower, where we could call for rescue when the tide dropped early in the morning. When we opened the outside door, freezing wind slapped me across the face. The Black Sea churned violently around the steel support columns. The fog was so thick that I couldn't see the beginning of the floating bridge. A warning light rotated slowly, cutting thin blades of illumination through the mist. Someone stood in the middle of the deck with his back to us. He wore an orange maintenance jacket and was about my height. I thought there were only 2 people here, I said. Lena stopped. The figure turned its head. It was me, my exact face, but its skin was deathly pale and its eyes were completely black like pools of spilled oil. It smiled with a mouth that stretched far too wide. Lena whispered, "Don't let it hear you say your own name." My double spoke. "Emily is still alive, Noah." Then it began running directly toward us. Wednesday, October 16. The thing wearing my face charged faster than any human could run. Its feet struck the steel deck with a hollow, uneven rhythm, as though there were too many joints inside its knees. Lena shouted, "Look at the ground, don't look at its face." I instinctively lowered my head just as it rushed past. A foul gust smelling of rotting seaweed struck my cheek. It didn't stop. It circled us and stood at the far end of the deck like a hunting dog waiting for a command. "Inside!" Lena pulled me away. We crashed through the steel door and rushed down the secondary staircase. Behind us, fingernails screeched across the door. I gasped for breath. "What is that thing?" "It's voice test." "What the hell does that mean?" "It wears the faces it likes." We hid inside the old laundry room. The industrial dryers were covered in salt dust. Stained bedsheets hung from the ceiling like corpses. Lena locked the door and turned toward me. "Rule 6. If it wears the face of someone you know, don't answer any of its questions. Every answer gives it something it can take from you." "Why didn't you tell me that from the beginning?" "Because it has never used the face of someone who was still alive before." The words made my stomach turn cold. "Still alive?" Lena didn't answer. Outside in the hallway, Emily's voice called out, so clear that my knees nearly gave way. "Noah, open the door." I had not heard that voice since the day I stood in the morgue. It caught slightly at the end of the sentence, exactly the way it did when she was tired. "If this is an imitation," I said. Lena grabbed me by the collar and pulled me close. "Emily is dead." Outside the door, the voice continued. "Noah, you left me in the car." I stopped breathing. I had never told anyone that detail. The accident happened in the rain. The car spun sideways after the first impact. I woke up first. Emily was trapped in her seat belt, her legs pinned beneath the dashboard. Smoke began filling the cabin. I crawled out and tried to go back, but the fire reached her before I did. I had never told anyone that story. No one. 3 knocks sounded against the door. Knock. Knock, knock. "Noah, don't run this time." I rushed toward the door. Lena punched me directly in the face. I fell hard onto the tiled floor. "Are you awake now?" Blood ran from my nose onto my lips. I hated that she was right. We left the laundry room through the rear door and entered the records storage area. That level was rarely used. Gray mold covered the walls, and the filing shelves leaned at angles as though something had struck them with enormous force. I held the flashlight, my hands still trembling. "How does it know about the accident?" "It searched through your mind." "How?" "When you looked at it in the darkness, when you spoke to it, when you almost opened the door." I stopped. "You keep calling it, but you've known far too much from the beginning." Lena did not turn around. "I know enough to be afraid." At the far end of the records room stood a steel door secured with a new chain. Painted across it in red were the words, "Tunnel access, closed." Lena's face turned pale. "That chain wasn't there yesterday." "What is the tunnel access?" "The maintenance tunnel below sea level, the place where the 6 workers died." She nodded toward it. A heavy impact echoed from the other side of the door, then a second, then a third. The entire door trembled. I stepped backward. "That thing is down there?" "No." Lena stared at the chain. "It's trying to get inside." She handed me a pair of bolt cutters. "Cut the chain." "I thought we were trying to avoid it." "If it's outside the tunnel, then something else is in here with us." The air seemed to drop several degrees. I cut through the chain while my hands shook from the cold. Every time the blades bit into the steel, the sound echoed unpleasantly through the room. The chain broke. We opened the door. The smell of stagnant water and spoiled flesh rushed out. A concrete staircase descended into flooded darkness. A long brown-black smear stained the wall as though someone had been dragged down the steps. Lena raised her flashlight. "Stay close to me." The water inside the tunnel reached our calves. Every step created splashing sounds that seemed to travel forever. The tunnel was narrow, with pipes running along the low ceiling. Long parallel claw marks covered several sections of the wall. I saw symbols carved into the concrete with a knife, 3 vertical lines repeated dozens of times. "What are those?" "Counting days," Lena answered quietly. "Whose days?" "The only survivor S." We reached a circular machinery chamber in the middle of the tunnel. Its door stood slightly open. An oil lamp burned inside. Someone was there or had been there moments ago. I stepped inside first and immediately slipped. The floor was covered with a layer of human hair as thick as a carpet. I fell and caught myself with my hands. My palm landed on a piece of freezing human scalp. I screamed and recoiled. A body lay curled in the corner, dressed in a rotting black glass uniform. Its mouth had been sewn shut with fishing line. Both eye sockets were packed with metal bolts. A rusted name tag had been driven into its chest. "Miles," a strangled sound escaped Lena's throat. She collapsed beside the body. "No, no." I looked at the corpse, then at her. "This is your brother," she nodded, retching. "But you said he disappeared last year." "Because I never found him." Much of the body had dried out. He had been dead for longer than a year. Much longer. I swept the flashlight beam around the chamber. Words had been scratched into the wall with fingernails and blood. "Do not trust Lena." I spun around. She was still holding her brother's body, crying without making a sound. My heart began pounding wildly. "Lena!" She looked up. Her eyes were red from crying, completely human. But behind her, reflected in the curved steel surface of the pressure tank, was something else. Not Lena. An impossibly tall figure with arms hanging almost to its knees and a head tilted sharply to one side, kneeling as it held the corpse. I stepped backward. The reflection smiled before the real Lena's expression had time to change. The oil lamp went out. In the darkness, her voice came from directly beside my ear. "You just looked at the reflection, Noah." From throughout the tunnel, knocks answered in unison. Knock, knock, knock. Thursday, October 17. I spun around and punched blindly into the darkness. My fist struck nothing. An enormous force slammed into my side and knocked me into the black water flooding the tunnel. My mouth filled with foul salt water. I choked and struggled upright in the absolute darkness. The flashlight floated away, spinning across the surface like a mad eye. Knocking echoed through the concrete walls. Knock, 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 then from several different directions. Knock, 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 like hundreds of hands searching for a way to reach me. "Noah," Lena's voice came from the left. "Get down." I threw myself flat just as something massive rushed over my head. The gust was so powerful that my hair stood on end. A deafening impact followed. Metal crumpled. I grabbed the flashlight. The beam shook violently as it swept across the tunnel. The thing stood less than 10 feet away. It was so tall that its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its skeletal body was wrapped in slick white skin. Its arms hung past its knees, and its joints bent backward like an insect's legs. Its mouth stretched all the way to its ears, filled with short, thick teeth shaped like nail heads. One eye was a deep black cavity. The other was a human eye staring directly at me, and it wore half of Lena's face. The other half was sagging flesh, as though it had been submerged in water for years. I froze. It tilted its head at an impossible angle and smiled with 2 voices speaking at once. "You've seen me now." The real Lena grabbed my collar from behind a pipe. "Run!" She was here. Then what was that thing? I turned away just as its claws struck the place where my head had been. The concrete exploded. We ran through the flooded tunnel. The creature crawled across the ceiling behind us as fast as a spider. I shouted, "What rule did you say reflections were?" "Rule 7. If you see someone in a mirror or reflective metal, but their position is different from their real body, don't look a second time. It will choose that form to hunt you." "I already looked." "I know." It dropped into the water directly behind us. Freezing water struck my back. I turned and swung the wrench into its face. It felt like hitting wet bone. A row of teeth flew loose and buried themselves in my shoulder like shards of glass. I screamed. The mark from breaking the rule appeared immediately. My left shoulder went numb and I could barely lift my arm. We squeezed through a narrow maintenance door and slammed it shut. The creature threw itself against the other side, making the hinges groan. Lena pulled me up a service staircase leading toward the turbine level. As we ran, she said, "Listen carefully. Some of the rules aren't meant to protect people." I already figured that out. They're meant to keep it hungry. I stopped for half a step. What? She turned around, her face deathly pale. I don't have time to explain this slowly anymore. The monster began tearing through the door at the bottom of the staircase. The turbine level sounded like hell. Massive flywheels turned slowly. Steel shafts made the entire floor vibrate. White steam blasted from leaking valves. The machinery was loud enough to drown out every other sound. Lena pulled me behind a control panel. Rule 8, if you hear someone calling your name in the turbine room, don't answer until the machines have stopped completely. Another rule, this one saves lives. Immediately, through the roar of the machinery, I heard Emily's voice directly beside my ear. Noah. I clenched my teeth. Noah, I'm so cold. I closed my eyes, then my mother's voice, then my own. Noah. Each time it was a different voice, but every one of them came from so close that it felt like someone was speaking against the back of my neck. I bit my lip until it bled. Lena looked at me and gave a small nod. Let it stay hungry. She opened an electrical cabinet and pulled out a stack of files sealed inside a waterproof plastic bag. Look. I opened the first file. It was a recruitment list from the past 3 years. My name was on the final line. Contract signed 2 months ago. I froze. I only started this week. No, Lena said. You were hired 2 months ago. That's impossible. You've already been here. A violent pain shot through my head. Images flashed through my mind. A red hallway, knocking, a wet hand dragging my leg, a man screaming, then everything turned white. I don't remember, because it uses memories as bait. I opened the second file, security camera photographs. I was standing alone on the outdoor deck in the rain, my face completely empty. The date was 6 weeks ago. This is fake. Right, the monster shrieked from among the turbines. It was crawling between the rotating flywheels, bending its body through impossibly narrow gaps. The half of its face that looked like Lena was crying. The other half was smiling. I stepped backward. What is it? Lena swallowed. The only survivor from 20 years ago was named Elias Crane. And you? She stared at me for a long time. I'm the 6th person hired to replace you. Everything inside me seemed to fall. Replace me? Black Glass needs someone to remain behind after every major title cycle. It chooses people burdened by guilt, people who can easily hear the voices of the dead. I couldn't breathe. You lied to me. I gave you a chance. A chance to do what? She pointed toward the ceiling where the title alarm had begun to howl. A chance to end it. The emergency lights turned blue. The water from the extreme high tide began to rise. The entire station shook. Lena pressed a brass key the length of a finger into my hand. Rule 9. When the title alarm sounds 3 times, do not remain on the highest level. It will push you down while wearing the form of the person you remember most. I don't trust you anymore. Whether you trust me or not, the upper deck will become a trap in 3 minutes. The alarm sounded for the second time. The monster crawled out of the darkness between the machines, moving slowly as though it already knew it had won. It spoke in Emily's voice. Noah, don't leave me this time. The alarm sounded for the 3rd time. Every fire door on the turbine level slammed shut at once, trapping us inside the same room with it. Friday, October 18. The fire doors locked around the turbine level like coffin lids closing. Bang, bang, bang. The final exit disappeared. The monster stood in the center of the machine room, its long body bent beneath the blue emergency lights. Steam poured around it like fog in a graveyard. It stepped toward us without hurrying. It knew we had nowhere left to run. Lena whispered, listen to me one last time. I've listened to you too much already. If we want to kill it, we have to reach the station's core. Why didn't you tell me that from the beginning? Because you would have run. You're right, the monster laughed in Emily's voice. You always run, it charged. I shoved Lena aside and grabbed the iron valve-locking bar nearby. I swung it sideways. The monster ducked impossibly low. The iron bar whistled over its head. Its claws struck my stomach. Not deeply, but enough to tear through my shirt and cut burning lines across my skin. I stumbled backward. Lena pulled the steam release lever. A column of high-pressure steam blasted directly into its face. Its flesh hissed as it burned. The creature released a piercing shriek and stepped back. The skin of its face peeled away in strips like boiled fish skin. Another face was underneath. Mine. Its eyes were wide open, its mouth twisted in pain. I froze. "No," I stammered. Lena grabbed my shoulders and shook me hard. "It uses the things you fear most." "That's my face." "No, that's your memory." The monster charged again. We ran through the maze of roaring turbines. The sounds of metal, steam, footsteps, and its laughter blended into an industrial nightmare. I slipped on the oily floor and fell face first. It grabbed my ankle and dragged me backward. My back scraped across the steel floor, throwing sparks. I slammed the wrench into its wrist. A sharp crack sounded. The bone in its arm broke, then twisted itself backward into place. It pulled harder. Lena jumped onto its back and wrapped a chain around its neck. "Noah." "The service hatch?" I pushed myself up and limped toward the trapdoor in the floor. Behind me, it threw Lena into the control panel. The screens exploded. She collapsed. I turned back. The monster was standing on Lena's chest, one claw pressed against her throat. It looked at me and spoke in my own voice. "Choose." I turned back to save her without thinking. The iron bar drove into the monster's side. It whipped around and bit into my right shoulder. Its teeth tore through the flesh. I screamed until my voice broke. It jerked its head and ripped away an entire chunk of muscle. Hot blood sprayed across my face. Lena crawled to her feet, grabbed me, and pulled us both through the open trapdoor. We fell down the dark maintenance stairs below. The monster lunged after us, but the trapdoor slammed shut on its arm. I heard bones being crushed. It kept laughing. The station's core lay deep beneath sea level. It was an enormous circular chamber with a central pump that trembled like the heart of a dying man. Water streamed down the walls in long trails. Red lights rotated slowly overhead. In the middle of the room stood a steel column descending into a deep black pit. Dozens of names had been carved by hand around the column. Some were old and faded. Others were recent. My name was there, Noah Carter, carved deeply into the steel, still fresh. I stepped backward. "No," Lena gasped for breath, clutching her chest. "This is where it keeps the replacements. I've never been down here." "You have." I grabbed my head. The memories struck like sledgehammers. I remembered. I had come to Black Glass 2 months earlier. I heard Emily's voice on the first night. I opened the door. I followed her voice into the tunnel. I carved my name into the steel column with the knife it gave me. Then I ran from that memory. It took everything else. I dropped to my knees. I chose to stay. "No," Lena said softly. "You were lured." The sound of bending metal came from the staircase above. It was coming down. Lena pulled me to my feet. "There's one more rule. You said there were 9. "There are 10. Then tell me." Her eyes filled with tears. "No one says Rule 10 aloud, because if you do, it will hear." The dragging footsteps came closer. She pointed toward the steel column. "Look." I studied the names. Everyone had been crossed out except those belonging to people who had died saving someone else. Only one name remained untouched, polished from being traced many times. Miles. I looked at Lena. "Your brother," she nodded. "It cannot choose someone who willingly dies for another person." Everything fell into place. Guilt was the bait. Selfishness was the chain. Sacrifice was the one thing it could not digest. The monster entered the station's core. This time it no longer pretended to be human. Its full body emerged beneath the red lights. It stood more than 7 feet tall. Its ribs protruded like the bars of a birdcage. Its arms reached the middle of its shins. Its lower jaw split into 4 sections and opened like a flower made of flesh. Inside was a second layer of teeth that moved independently. Its skin hung loose like an old raincoat. Every step left behind black water and fragments of human fingernails. Dozens of eyes opened along its neck and stared at me. "At last, you remember." Lena handed me the brass key. "The lock is at the base of the column. Open it and seawater will flood the core. We'll die." "Yes. Is there another way?" "No." The monster raced up the wall, crawled across the ceiling, and launched itself downward like a spear. I shoved Lena out of the way. Its claws punched through my chest from behind. A terrible cold exploded inside my rib cage. I coughed up blood. It leaned close to my ear and spoke in Emily's voice. "You still chose wrong this time." I laughed. "No." I gripped its arm tightly to keep it trapped, then threw the key to Lena. She caught it. I screamed, "Open it!" Saturday, October 19. Lena inserted the key into the steel lock at the base of the column. The monster roared. For the first time, it did not sound human. It sounded like a train whistle being dragged through raw flesh. like a dying whale stranded on shore, like hundreds of people drowning at once. The claws inside my chest pulled harder. It felt as though my ribs were being pried apart from within. Lena turned the key. The lock did not move. It stuck. I tightened my grip on the monster's arm with what little strength remained. Again, it tried to pull its hand from my chest, but I used my entire weight to hold it down. Blood flowed across my stomach, hot at first, then rapidly turning cold. The eyes along its neck opened at the same time. Every one of them looked at Lena. Everyone blinked together. Lena turned the key again. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber. The entire steel column shook. The monster went wild. It tore its arm from my chest and threw me against the floor. I did not feel the pain immediately. I only realized that I could not draw enough air. The hole in my chest pumped blood with the few heartbeats I had left. The monster charged toward Lena. I grabbed a chain from the floor and wrapped it around its ankle. It stumbled half a step. That half step was enough to save her life. Lena rolled aside as its claws punched through the steel floor where her head had been. Noah, keep going. She grabbed the emergency valve wheel beneath the column and pulled with all her strength. The entire station core groaned. The flood alarm began to scream. Seawater blasted through cracks in the walls in streams as sharp as knives. The red lights turned blinding white. The monster stopped. It turned toward me. This time it wore Emily's face, not distorted, not torn, just Emily as she had looked on the last day I saw her. "If you let me go," it said in her voice, "you'll see me again." I began crying immediately. Hot tears ran down my freezing cheeks. "I'm sorry," it smiled. "Then close the valve." I almost crawled toward it. Then I saw that its feet were still bent backward, ending in 3 black claws. Emily never walked barefoot. I laughed and coughed up blood. Almost. With the last of my strength, I pulled hard on the chain. It collapsed. Lena rushed forward, drove the brass key deeper into the valve core, and snapped off the handle. The valve opened completely. The eastern wall exploded. The Alaskan sea poured inside like a freight train, so cold it hurt every nerve in my body. It swept away everything: toolboxes, electrical cabinets, fragments of rusted bodies, and me. My back slammed into the steel column, nearly knocking me unconscious. The monster clung to the ceiling with its claws, screaming. Its skin began peeling away in the water like paper burning in reverse. Layer after layer of human faces slipped free. Lena, me, Emily, and others I had never seen. They fell from it like masks. Beneath them was only a twitching mass of gray flesh covered in hundreds of tiny mouths. It did not transform into people. It was made from them. Lena swam against the current toward me. She pressed her hands against the wound in my chest, even though it was useless. "Go," I rasped. "You can't save me. The station is sinking. You still have time." She shook her head and began to cry. "The first time I brought you here, it was because I wanted to use you. I know. I lied about almost everything. I know." "Then why did you still save me?" I looked at her. "Because I finally understand Rule 10. It was not the words carved into the column. It was not the key. It was the one thing the monster could never predict. A person could choose someone else over themselves. I'm tired of only saving myself." The water rose to our necks. The structure of the station core began to crack apart. I pressed the broken piece of the key into her hand. "Go!" The monster was rebuilding itself. The tiny mouths bit into one another, assembling themselves into a new jaw. It dragged its body through the water toward us. Faster, angrier. I shoved Lena toward the emergency staircase, then grabbed a severed electrical cable floating beside me. The exposed copper was still sparking. She understood immediately. "No ado. Climb!" The monster lunged. I wrapped the cable around the flooded steel column and seized the creature with both arms. When its body struck mine, I drove the live wire into the center of its gray flesh. White light exploded through the core chamber. My entire body locked rigid. I smelled my own flesh burning. Its scream tore through the water like something ripping apart the human mind. Lena climbed the ladder, crying as she looked down at me. I managed to shout one final sentence. "Don't look back!" The water swallowed the light. The machine stopped. The knocking stopped. For the first time since I arrived at Black Glass, everything was completely silent. By the time Lena reached the upper deck, dawn was rising behind the fog. The Black Glass station tilted sharply, then slowly sank into the sea. The floating bridge had just emerged above the water, resembling the spine of a dead animal. She ran across it alone. Behind her, the entire station disappeared beneath the waves. Only a few large bubbles rose to the surface before bursting. They found Lena 7 hours later, wandering along the rocky shore. She was suffering from hypothermia, dehydration, and severe shock. She told them everything. No one believed her, of course. But 3 days later, the salvage team sent her a sealed bag. Inside was my rusted name tag and a piece of paper wrapped in plastic. It was written in my handwriting. There was only one sentence. If you hear knocking beneath the floor, don't knock back. Sunday, October 20, I knew I was dead. The strangest thing was not the pain. It was the relief, like carrying something for so long that you forget it is there until one day it suddenly disappears. The guilt, the grief, Emily screaming inside the car, all of it left me at once. Then the sea swallowed me. I should have vanished at the bottom of Black Glass Bay, but I woke in darkness, not heaven, not hell. A narrow steel compartment as cold as a freezer with water reaching my chest. Every breath tasted of rust. I tried to move. There was still a hole in my chest, but it was no longer bleeding. The skin around the wound had sealed itself with pale white tissue like an old scar. I looked down into the water. There was no reflection, only a deep, endless darkness. Then 3 knocks sounded from the other side of the steel wall. Knock, knock, knock. I closed my eyes. No! I broke out of the compartment using a shattered hinge. Outside was one of Black Glass's maintenance corridors, intact, not submerged, not destroyed. The lights were still on. The machinery was still running, but I knew the station had sunk the day before. I had pulled it beneath the sea myself. I walked through a long corridor covered by a thin layer of water as smooth as a mirror. There was no one there. Every door I opened led somewhere different. The dining room opened onto the outdoor deck. The outdoor deck opened into the records room. The records room opened onto a staircase that led back into itself. The station had become something else. A maze wearing the skin of Black Glass. I found the whiteboard in the maintenance room where Lena had stood on my first night. This time, all 10 rules were written on it. In my handwriting: 1. Do not knock back. 2. Do not look into the darkness between the flashes of the lights. 3. After 4:00 a.m., do not look back at the cameras. 4. If you hear running on the ceiling, turn left. 5. If everything becomes silent, ring the bell 3 times. 6. If it wears the face of someone you know, do not answer. 7. If a reflection is different from reality, do not look a second time. 8. In the turbine room, do not answer when your name is called. 9. When the tidal alarm sounds 3 times, do not remain on the highest level. 10. If you wake after dying, do not let anyone take your place. My hand began to shake. I did not remember writing them, but I knew the handwriting was mine. The radio shrieked. I rushed to the desk. An unfamiliar man's voice came through the static. Black Glass, does anyone copy? This is Dean Porter, contract maintenance. The boat just dropped me off at the floating bridge. Is anyone here? My heart stopped for a beat. Everything began to spin. Dean Porter, the new man, the next one. I grabbed the radio. Go back. The signal broke apart. He laughed nervously. All right, that's a strange way to welcome someone. The main entrance opened. I ran into the hallway. The station changed to stop me. A staircase led into a solid wall. A door opened above a deep pool of water. The hallway stretched longer every time I ran. The lights flickered constantly. In every moment of darkness, faces emerged from the shadows. Emily, Lena, me. They all said the same thing: stay. I bit my tongue until it bled to keep myself alert. I turned left when I heard footsteps running across the ceiling. I did not look at the reflections. I did not answer when my name was called. I was using my own rules to fight the place. Eventually, I reached the main deck. The fog was as thick as dirty cotton. The floating bridge had risen above the water. Dean Porter was dragging his toolbox up the steel slope. He was around 40, with uneven stubble and a navy blue cold-weather jacket. An ordinary man, a tired man, a man who needed money. Just like me. Hey, he waved. Finally, someone's here. I ran toward him, then stopped. The deck was reflected in the thin layer of water covering the steel. In the reflection, Dean was not alone. Something tall was crawling close behind him. I looked up. In reality, there was nothing behind him. Dean frowned. Are you all right? Rule 7, do not look a second time. I looked down at the reflection again. The thing behind Dean had lifted its head. It was me. It rose from the surface of the deck like a body climbing out through a skin made of water. Every part of my body had been stretched too far. My hands reached my knees. My neck twisted sideways. My jaw split open all the way to my ears. Dean turned around too slowly. The monster wearing my face drove its claws through his shoulder and lifted him into the air. Dean screamed until his voice went hoarse. I charged into it. The two versions of me slammed together on the wet steel. It felt like fighting my own dead body. It laughed in my voice. You thought sacrifice was the end? I kept punching it. It was the beginning. It threw me over the railing. I caught the metal edge with one hand. Below me, the Black Sea churned violently. Dean crawled away, leaving a trail of blood. I pulled myself back onto the deck, grabbed the brass bell hanging beside the emergency door, and rang it 3 times. Keng, keng, keng. The entire station shook. The monster froze in pain. I shouted at Dean, "Run to the bridge." He struggled to stand. The monster charged me one final time. We rolled across the deck and slammed into the bent railing. It forced my head beneath a pool of standing water. "Stay here with me," it whispered in Emily's voice. I whispered back, "No." I hooked my fingers into its eye socket. It screamed. I pulled both of us over the edge of the deck. The Alaskan sea was so cold that my consciousness shattered into pieces. I sank with it. Above me, I saw Dean staggering across the floating bridge through the fog. Good, the monster wrapped itself around me and dragged me toward the bottom. But this time, I was no longer empty. I held it like a corpse, tightly. We sank deeper, deep enough that light could no longer follow us, to a place where there was no knocking. 3 months later, Dean Porter refused every offshore contract he was offered. He told the Coast Guard that black glass had never existed on any map. It was only a mass of rusted steel that rose and disappeared with the tide. No one believed him, of course. But every year on October 20, fishermen near that bay hear a bell ring 3 times through the fog. Keng, 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 and none of them ever knock against the hull of their boats after dark.